I've had conversations with people, and there are some that are like, yo, Chicago is not top 10. It's not top 10 as far as murders, and it's not really a problem. And most of the people who say that don't live in Chicago. I want to share this list real quick. Right now, you can't really go by 2025 numbers, obviously, because 2025 is not over yet. This is a study that is from 2023 to 2024, just last year. And this was the report that the White House was referencing. This is from the Rochester Institute of Technology. And they did a whole report about crime from 2023 to 2024. So if you go and you look at the list, right? Number one on the list is St. Louis, Missouri, right? St. Louis. Now, St. Louis has, I'm only talking about 2024 numbers right now. They had 150 homicides, and they have a population of 275,000 people, roughly, and they have a rate of 54. So the rate, right? The rate is, like I said, again, it's about the murders, total murders divided by 100,000 people. Now, Chicago on this list ranks 8. So Chicago, for example, has a population of almost 2.7 million people, and they had 573 murders in 2024, and that gives them a rate of 21. So 21 out of every 100,000 people are essentially being killed. A lot of people are saying, critics of the Trump administration is like, yo, this is a political move. This is something to upstage the Democrats. Now, one of the things people have to understand is that the gun violence that's happening in Chicago is something that has always been an issue in Chicago. And it was even a bigger issue back in 2020, 2021, and crime has kind of dipped a little bit since then. But the reason why I think this is a big issue for a couple of reasons. One, J.B. Pritzker, the governor, Brandon Johnson, the mayor, right, has been really worried about the National Guard coming there. Politically, it's not going to look good for them. They would be getting upstaged by a Republican president, and it's not going to be good for the Dem Party, right? That's pretty obvious to the naked eye. The bigger issues that are going on in Chicago also is the fact that Brandon Johnson, as a mayor, his approval rating is about 25%. So generally, residents are not happy with Brandon Johnson for a couple of reasons. One, it's the violence. Two, it's the money that was spent on immigration. And three, they're the property tax issues in regards to higher property taxes after, obviously, he said, like every politician, I'm not going to raise your property taxes. And they're going into 2026 with the $1 billion deficit after spending $600 million plus on the illegal migrants, paying the vendors and all that stuff for housing and food. So if Chicago is 8th on the list for the murder rate, is Chicago important? Shouldn't they be looking at other cities? Shouldn't they be looking at St. Louis, New Orleans, Detroit, DC's number 4, Atlanta, Richmond? I think the reason, if you take a look at even DC, let me take a look here. So when you look at the National Guard even going to DC, if you went by the murder rate, right? Let me bring this back up real quick. If you looked at the actual rate, again, the rate is the murders divided by 100,000 people. That is a normalized rate to help compare city to city and reference risk of homicide in one city versus another. So one would say, okay, well, the National Guard, they first dealt with DC. DC is number 4 on the list, right? DC is just a little bit above Chicago as far as their rate. Their rate is 27 murders per 100,000 people. So why did Trump go to D.C. first? I think Trump went to D.C. first, obviously, because D.C. is the capital, right? Chicago is important because it's the 3rd largest city in America. And it's also supposed to be another business hub, right? It's also one of those cities where they're talking about bringing the Olympics there next year. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but Chicago's crimes happen in a very, if you ever been to Chicago and you understand Chicago's very segregated. Yes, there's 2.7 million people that live in Chicago, but a lot of the crimes are concentrated in certain areas. This is a Tribune report from the end of last year, 2024. This is data collected through December 31st, 2024. It goes through the 573 murders. It kind of goes through where all the murders happen. The top place is in Austin, which is the west side. You have Greater Grand Crossing, you have South Shore, Arbor and Gresham, North Lawndale, Chatham, South Lawndale, Roseland, Inglewood. At the end of the day, there are real people losing lives and having their lives torn apart. So there's so many things exacerbating the issue because, again, you also have the migrant money that was spent And then people also don't understand that, look, let's keep it real. A lot of the Mexican cartel, a lot of the drugs, Chicago's always been a hub. El Chapo, everybody knows who El Chapo is. Chicago's always been the hub. The crime is still high for that city. Just for example, even in New York has 4 times the population of Chicago. Again, these are 2023 numbers. New York has 4 times the population. Chicago's, let's say, 2.8 million. So New York is almost 4 times bigger at about 8.5 million, if my numbers are right. And New York's crime is lower than Chicago. What does that really say? You can go between the murder rates and make different comparisons and say, well, this place is worse than that place and that place is worse than this place. But it all depends on what you want to compare it to. Again, you're talking about New York, greater metropolitan area, 8.5 million people. Chicago's 2.7. It's a fourth of the size, but has more murders. So if you compare Chicago to New York, Chicago's crime is high. Again, if you compare it to LA, Chicago's crime is high because these are populations that are bigger than Chicago, but Chicago has more murders and a higher per capita rate. So again, like when you compare Chicago to Birmingham, Alabama, or you compare Chicago to St. Louis or Memphis, Tennessee, yes, Chicago dwarfs them in population, so they have more murders. But so does New York dwarf Chicago in population and has less murders. So again, I don't care what they're telling you about crime being down. Crime is still high. And that's where disseminating or deconstructing or detangling the murder rate versus the actual raw murder numbers are important. So you can have a conversation just to even say, you know what places need to have attention. So